If you're someone who wants to travel for free or save thousands of dollars a year on anything that you buy or get the lowest possible interest rates on any typical loan, then this video is 100% for you. In today's video, we're going to talk about how you could effectively climb the credit card ladder so that way you could take advantage of all the benefits that credit cards have to offer. In 2024, there were new credit cards and new changes to offers that you need to know about that we're going to cover in this video today. We're going to cover everything from what your credit needs to look like to the best cards that you should be focusing on to achieve the maximum amount of benefit. So let's jump right into the video.
Let's begin with talking about 5 factors that affect your credit score, right? Because if you want to climb the credit ladder, you need to understand what your credit factors are, what affects your credit score, and how you could start getting your hands on credit cards to then get some of the best credit cards that are offered out there. And we're going to dive into cashback benefits, point benefits, how to get there, some really important pro tips. We're going to talk about all that stuff. But to climb the credit ladder, first, we need to understand what actually goes into your credit score. So the first things are payment history, right? Having on-time payments, not being late on payments, having part of your payment history also includes derogatory marks, right? Like collections, bankruptcies, things like that. And it's going to be harder to climb the credit ladder if you have late payments and things like that. So obviously you try your best to pay all your bills on time and keep track of all the bills that you have so you don't end up, having late payments, having charge-offs, having collections, things like that. Because having 100% payment history is going to allow you to get the best credit options. Same with having low credit card utilization. It's best to not apply for credit if you have maxed out credit cards. You oftentimes get lesser results than you would originally desire. So my tip to people is really get your credit card usage down low enough where you could get approved for business credit. Or even just personal credit in general. There's plenty of times where we run into people who have a 730 or 740 score and they could still apply, but say they also had a maxed out credit card. They had like a 730 or a 740 credit score and they had a maxed out card. Sometimes they may run into trouble with getting the approvals that they want because they have that maxed out card. So it's always best practice to pay down that card before applying for more credit because it helps you get better results. And it becomes challenging to get approved with more credit with the same bank you have a maxed out credit card with until you pay down that card. So these are just very simple, basic tips going into the credit ladder that I want to cover first. Another thing too is credit age. So you qualify for more elite and prestigious credit cards the longer you have credit age. So one of the big tips I'm going to really share with you guys here tonight is actually having more accounts and stacking those accounts early on in your credit history, because that's going to be weight going into the future, right? Every time you add another credit card, this reduces your credit age because your average age of accounts becomes lower. So one of the best things that you could do, especially if you're early on starting with credit, is get a lot of credit cards early on. So that way in the future, when you open up another credit card, it doesn't so much affect your credit age. And it helps you with getting more lending options, because if you're demonstrating on-time payments with many different banks, and say you have like 10 credit cards and you've had them for 5 years and you've been on time, it's going to be very easy for you to get approved for more credit. So a tip with credit age here is try to stack more accounts very early on before the last thing that the thing that really sucks for people, say you have like one credit card for 10 years and then you apply for like 2 or 3 more, that's going to hurt your credit age. But if instead you applied for 4 credit cards 10 years ago and then you apply for like another 2, it doesn't affect your credit age as much as you only having like 1 in the beginning and then applying for 4 later. So taking this into consideration, by having more accounts early on and growing that with credit age, easier it's going to be for you to get more lending options in the future. Credit mix, this is something that I'm personally working on myself. I have a lot of credit cards. I have maybe like 30 plus credit cards, both business and personal combined. I think I have like 20 personal and like 10 business, something like that, something crazy. So that's great for credit, and you could continuously get more credit. Something I'm learning as I get into new lending products, having loans is also very helpful too. So if you could have credit mix like a car loan, student loans, a mortgage, even if you just open like a personal loan just to have credit mix, it certainly helps because you're demonstrating your borrowing history, you're demonstrating your ability to manage capital, and you're demonstrating good borrowing history with multiple different products. So that definitely contributes to having a better credit score and qualifying for better products as you climb the credit ladder, and credit inquiries as well. Obviously, inquiries reduce your credit, but as you climb the credit ladder, credit inquiries don't matter as much. Inquiries are going to matter in the beginning when you're building credit, but as you start getting deeper into credit and you go higher up the ladder, credit inquiries matter a lot less. A lot of this matters a lot less the higher you climb up the credit ladder, because ideally, if you're doing everything right, you're going to have really great credit and inquiries don't really matter as much. Let's see. Hold on, I got a comment here. I actually have a question here. So someone said, well, you just said funding without checking credit scores, taxes, documentation. So the only thing that banks really do check is the credit score. They actually don't look at income documentation. They don't look at income documentation. They don't ask for tax returns, pay stubs, bank statements, anything like that. They only check your personal credit for the stuff that we're going to be talking about here tonight. So wanted to make sure that's pretty clear for everyone. Everyone's got a good understanding of that. And we're going to talk about credit score requirements and things like that tonight as well too. So let's actually jump into it. So let's keep this in mind. The 5 credit factors that affect your credit score, right? So I'm going to put that right here. So let's kick things off on this ladder with talking about starter credit cards. Let's talk about some of those first credit cards you could get your hands on. Say you're someone that doesn't have many credit cards. Maybe you have like one very low limit credit card, something like that. Let's talk about starter credit cards and some good credit cards that people could go out there and start getting their hands on so they could start climbing the credit ladder. Because at the end of the credit ladder are the best cashback options, the highest limits, all the things that you would want in a credit card that, help you actually make money with your credit. Start with having a really good, personal credit card. So probably one of the best starter credit cards, in my opinion, is going to be the Discover It Cashback credit card. And we're going to dive a little bit more deep into like what's included in this credit card and why I think it's just so amazing for people to get as their first credit card. So the Discover It Cashback card, you typically don't need a very high credit score to get approved for the Discover It Cashback credit card. Typically, you don't need any credit, and sometimes you could even get approved with like a 670 credit score or no credit at all. So this is like a really good starter credit card that most people can get. Even if it's a $500 limit or a $1,000 limit, it's a great first credit card for people to get. There's no annual fee on the card. You get 5% cash back at many different places throughout the year. There's like a full-on cashback calendar. So from January to March, say that you go to restaurants a lot or you go to like Walgreens or CVS a lot, right? You have the opportunity to get 5% cash back at all these places during that time. For this quarter, right, you have gas stations, all these really good benefits that you're getting with the card. Say that you're spending like, I don't know, during these 3 months, say maybe you spend like $1,000. Maybe you spend $1,000 on gas and maybe you spend like another $2,000 at Home Depot, right? That would be 5% of $3,000. It's pretty nice cash back when you start adding it up, right? And same with all these other different places where you're getting all this great cash back benefits at various different places. Usually they do Amazon at the end of the year, which is a really good one too. So you get all this 5% cash back, 1% cash back on everything else, and you ultimately get 2% cash back on this card. And this is an insane starter credit card. And most people could get approved for this. I mean, I find it very difficult to see people getting denied for this credit card. And it gives you so many great cash back benefits. Besides just climbing the credit ladder and starting with a Discover card, another card that I find pretty good is I'm pulling up the picture, is the Capital One Quicksilver One card. This is also a really good starter card. The only thing I don't like about Capital One cards is that they pull your credit from all three credit bureaus at the same time. So if you're applying for a Capital One card, they're usually going to pull your credit from Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax all at the same time, which really makes the Discover card my favorite starter card to start climbing up the ladder. And there's even more cards I could ultimately suggest to you guys that you could really get started with. And I'll actually list all these different cards that are personally my favorite for you. So some other cards that are really good are the Apple card. I think the Apple card is also a really good starter credit card. Usually, you have to, this may not be like the first credit card that you get. You might have to own the Discover card for at least 3 to 6 months before you get an Apple card. But these are three cards I really like. Probably another card is just simply like the basic card with your existing bank, right? So say that maybe you bank with Chase or Bank of America, right? Getting like a simple starter card with one of those banks, if you already have a checking account with them, is also a really good option. And so this is going to be a very interesting take on all of this when it comes to starter credit cards. I would get all of them. And I'll tell you why. Because of what I mentioned to you before about your credit age, you want to get more of these cards early in the beginning. So that way, as you go throughout time, your credit age has a lot of weight in the beginning, right? As your cards get older and as you add more cards, it's going to just help you because you're going to be establishing more credit history, more payment history with all these places. All three of these cards, by the way, especially the Discover card and the Apple card and the Capital One card, like they'll do soft pull credit limit increases as well. So with Discover, you could frequently max out the card and request a credit limit increase. Same with the Apple card. You could max out the card, request a credit limit increase. And these are really good cards to have early on in the beginning that allow you to grow your score, and they have a lot of weight because when you start adding all these other cards, your credit age is going to go down and your credit score is going to go down. So if you could actually, in the first year of having credit, get your hands on at least 4 or 5 cards, in my opinion, in the beginning, is a really, really, really good strategy forward. It's going to help you so much. And let me know in the chat if that makes sense to you guys, like why, that's my philosophy. But the more accounts that you have, the easier it is for you to get approved at all these other places because you're demonstrating a good borrowing history with more than just one bill. At this point, you have 5 bills that you have to stay accountable of, right? And you have exposure with all these different places. You have all these comparable credit limits. When you go and apply for more credit, you can get higher limits because you've been taking care of multiple cards from a very early time. So this is probably one of my biggest tips for just starting out strong when it comes to climbing the credit ladder is having really good, like having a number of different starter cards like the Discover card. You could get soft pull credit limit increases. It has great cashback benefits. Apple card, same deal. You could usually get a $3,500 limit to start, $2,000 limit to start. Sometimes it's $6,000, and you could get that up to $10,000 within maybe like a year or two of using the card, maxing it out, paying it down. And every time you request a credit limit increase, it's a soft credit pull. So getting a bunch of these cards, especially like these three and cards with your existing bank, whether it be Wells Fargo, whether it be Chase, whether it be Bank of America, whether it be your local credit union, whether it be Navy Fed, right? These are all going to be good to get within the first year of owning credit. And the way that it may go is that you have to hold on to this Discover card, make on-time payments for 6 months, keep your credit card utilization low, so pay the card before the due date. So that way, when it reports to your credit report, it shows that you have 0% utilization. Maybe during that 6 months, max out the card, let it post to your credit score that you maxed out the card, and then pay it down. And then that way on your credit report, one of the things that they look at on your credit report is what was your highest balance that you've ever reported. That helps when you go and ask for higher credit limits because it shows that you've paid down high balances. lot of tips. A lot of tips all kind of started out strong when you go to climbing up the credit ladder, because this stuff's very important. If you want to get like the cards that you want, if you want to get high limits, if you want to get better cards, better cash back, it starts with demonstrating a good borrowing history with a number of different banks early on, getting cards that you could do soft pull credit limit increases on so you could continuously increase your credit limit. And that's going to help you actually grow your credit. It's going to give you a lot of weight on your credit age, and it's going to help you grow going into the future. So let's talk about going into the next one. And guys, if you have questions, drop it in the Q&A. Someone asked, can I apply for personal 0% credit cards? Yeah. So if you're someone who's inside my funding program already, we mostly apply for business credit cards. So the reason why we do business credit cards is because when you max out the business credit card, it doesn't affect your personal credit score. Like, it doesn't report the debt to your personal credit. Additionally, you get higher credit limits. But if you want personal 0% cards, just understand a lot of the things that we just went over here, that whenever you apply for a personal credit card, it reduces your credit age, as well as if you max out the credit card, it'll reduce your credit score as well. So, like for some of you, right, maybe you're having trouble get to the 800s. The trick is really just hold on to your credit for a long period of time. And if you're someone who's new to credit and doesn't have many credit cards, and you already have maybe credit age less than like 3 years old, you can maybe go get yourself like a ton of more credit cards right now, maybe like 5 more, something like that, maybe 4 more, something along those lines, and hold on to those credit cards for like another 3 to 4 years, and your credit score will just continue increasing. The highest credit card, the highest like rating that you could have for credit mix, like for total accounts, is actually 21 plus accounts. So the more accounts you have, the better that actually is for your credit score. Let's see. Someone said, I have an 820 score, but only 3 cards. That's a good question. So you could apply for a 4th, but if you do apply for a 4th card, that 800 score is likely going to go down. I think it's going to make sense for you going into this next section where we're talking about like, I'm just going to label this mid to high tier credit cards. It's going to make more sense when we talk about this, actually, because I'll talk about a lot of different concepts that make sense for you, right? Because you got to, like, the idea of credit is having purpose for using the credit, right? So whether it be I want to get funding to start a business, whether it be I want to save money on bills, so I'm going to get another credit card, right? Through getting cash back and things like that. Like, I want to make money with credit. I want to travel for free. There just has to be a purpose behind what you want. And the best way to look at that is to look at what your spending is going to look like. Whether that spending is going to be on a new business, that spending is going to be on a restaurant. I like to pick credit cards based along the lines of how I'm spending and when I want to pay it back, and what are the ultimate perks that I want to get out of a credit card, such as travel or cash back or investment. So it really depends. Like, you don't have to open up another credit card if you have 3 cards. Like, if anything, try to get some credit limit increases on your credit cards, but only open credit cards with a purpose, in my opinion. Is this for a business entity? This is just a broad credit ladder training. We're going to talk a little bit about business credit cards later on tonight for sure. So let's see. So, all right. So there's a lot of different best credit cards I could talk about here, right? So as you're doing this the right way, as you're doing the starter cards the right way, and you're getting more, credit, you're building your credit score, maybe you're starting to get into the mid 700s at this point. Maybe it's been a year or two and you've increased all your credit limits to like 5,000 per credit limit, which is actually really easy to do with these cards. Especially, I wouldn't be able to speak much about the Quicksilver card, but I could definitely speak on that for the Discover card and the Apple card. It's a lot easier to get credit limit increases with those cards, and it's very simple to get like a $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 credit limit with those cards within 2 years. That's going to help you get comparable credit limits that you want, getting you a $10,000 limit, a $5,000, and I'm talking on personal credit cards. For business credit cards, it gives you the opportunity to get $10,000 to $50,000 on each credit card, right? And the idea is also building relationships here, right? So as you start getting into some of these other banks, right, you start getting into building relationships and getting into better cashback cards, better opportunities with many of these different banks, right? So, you start looking at different credit cards that are really good for different categories, which I'm actually looking through, right? For example, let's take this card. This will be a good card to talk about with people. So this American Express Blue Cash Preferred card. This card has a $95 annual fee. It has a really good welcome bonus, but it has really, really good cashback benefits. Like it's got 6% cash back at grocery stores, which is really sweet, right? So say that I have my calculator on a different screen, 6,000 times 6%. That's $360 in cash back. That's pretty nice. That's like one grocery bill, for spending 6,000 by using this card. You also get 6% cash back on streaming services. It does have a 0% offer as well. This is going to be a card that you can get your hands on after you've demonstrated some good credit history. And this is a good bank that will give you a higher credit limit too. And more of these kinds of cards, more of these kinds of opportunities start to present themselves. And I'll get into a couple of interesting cards here that you could get a hold of. And I'm going to show like a bunch of different credit card offers here. Let me see. I can't find my mouse. Okay. That you could start getting your hands on. But these cards are definitely not going to be first credit cards, for example. I see someone's raising their hand. Best way to get a question in would be to throw it inside the Q&A. So like this card, for example, this is a really interesting cash back credit card. It does have a 0% fee. You get up to 5% cash back on 2 categories of your choosing. What is it, like utilities? You get 2% cash back on 1 everyday category you choose each quarter, right? You start getting into these really solid cashback cards. Oh, that's a secured card. No, there's a different one. Hold on. Oh, here we go. This was the one I was looking at. That one's really good. But yeah, this cashback card, right? And you could get pretty high credit limits on these kinds of cards, and you start looking into different cards that have better cashback benefits and give you the opportunity to get, better rewards, better different things, right? Like the US Bank Shopper Cash Rewards credit card. Like a lot of people don't know these cards exist. You get 6% cash back on your first 1,500 in combined eligible purchases, just depending on where you go. A 1.5% cash back on everything. You get really good cashback benefits. And this wouldn't be a card that you can get right up front, right in the beginning. It's very difficult to get approved for that. You have to start building your credit first, which I'm going to copy this and paste it here, right? There's also Chase cards. There's many different cards, right? You start getting into the area of being able to get better cashback cards, better things like that. And you start getting things that start saving you money. You start getting higher credit limits because it really starts with building a really strong credit portfolio in the beginning with cards that give you soft pull credit limit increases, that give you higher limits. It's easier to get higher limits with them, that offer you, like, you get a lot of them in the beginning, because then it's easier for you to get a lot of these harder credit cards with more of these more difficult banks that have just better cashback benefit opportunities, right? Maybe, let me think here. Let's see. This is another really good credit card, for example, this Wells Fargo card. This is 2% cash back on everything. Here's a good one, right? This would be a really good one to share with you guys, right? Like this Capital One Saver One Cash Rewards credit card. Get 10% cash back on purchases made through Uber and Uber Eats. 8% cash back on Capital One entertainment purchases, right? So like if you use Uber a lot, this would be a great card for you. 3% cash back on dining, 3% cash back on entertainment. There's a lot of different things here. I might even want to go get this credit card for the Uber rewards. Honestly, that's really solid, right? So, and there's no annual fee. You're getting paid to use your credit cards. And you get more opportunity to get your hands on these kinds of credit cards that you see here on the screen by getting a really strong start and ultimately building your credit early on, stacking in the beginning, a lot of credit cards very early on, like maybe getting 4 to 5 to, get a lot of weight in to your credit age, and having those have higher limits because those are easier cards to get higher credit limits on. And then when you get these cards, you're typically going to get approved for higher limits because you already have other credit cards that have higher limits and you've demonstrated good borrowing history with at least 4 to 5 different banks. So it makes it easier to get your hands on these kinds of credit cards that have better cashback rewards points, and different benefits, right? I could start talking about different cards too, like the Amex Platinum or the Amex Gold. I'd probably throw them here in this category as well, right? Where the big key here is like now that you start getting more credit cards, like the things that you start looking at are the kinds of benefits that you get from the credit cards. Like, why would you get a credit card? It's going to come down to either like an investment, like a 0% offer with a high credit limit. It's going to come down to maybe getting cash back at your everyday purchases. Or maybe you want to travel and there's a credit card like the Amex Gold card where you get 4 times points on a select different categories. And you could start stacking those points to use them for travel. As you start growing your credit, like the most important thing is having really good cards in the beginning that make it easier for you to get higher approvals on these future credit cards. So I want to jump into a final section here, which obviously I want to talk about business credit cards, right? And getting good business credit cards. So now, right, so business tier credit cards. So now you don't need to have these credit cards to get business credit cards. It's definitely going to help at least if you start with the starter credit card, right? Because even you could even have 1 or 2 credit cards and still get approved for business credit cards. But obviously, the more credit cards you have, this is where I'm going to start expanding this a little bit more, right? The more credit cards that you have, the on-time payment history being there, you're taking care of your credit, you have longer credit age, you have higher limits, right? Getting like these, like essentially cheat code cards in the beginning and getting a lot of them early on and growing them with your credit age makes it easier for you to get the business credit cards that you want in the future. It makes it easier for you to get harder business credit cards that have really good cashback benefits, business credit cards with higher limits because you've been increasing your limits over time with these different banks. It makes it easier for you to get better business credit card results, right? And so there's a number of different business credit cards that we could obviously jump into and talk about, but this is really like the ladder in which you want to climb to get there. And a lot of it starts with having a really good start and having like a lot of credit cards early on and having higher limits with those credit cards. So it becomes easier to get the beneficial credit cards that give you better cash back, better rewards, higher limits. And, some of these cards here on the screen are like easy cheat code cards that will give you high credit limits that make it easier for you to get what you're looking for with other banks.